Good day, everyone. Can everyone hear my voice? Everything's okay? Good, thank you. So welcome to today's webinar titled AgriStack Webinar, Leveraging DPI to Support Farmer Choice, Build Sustainable Agriculture Practices, and Power Equitable Economies. My name is Fitya Findi. I am Country Operation Advisor for Asia at Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, or CDPI, and I will be your host today. For those who don't know us, CDPI is a pro bono tech architecture advisory working with governments around the world to advance their digital public infrastructure, or DPI. Our vision is to impact the lives of 1 billion people through well-designed population-scale infrastructure. Today at the webinar, we are privileged to be joined by DPI experts and evangelists, DPG owners, agriculture practitioners who are keen to share their knowledge on what DPI is, its key principles, and to what extent it has led exponential impact at society level across countries. The webinar will also unpack the DPI thinking in agriculture, the positive impact it has led to the betterment of this sector, and what we can do more collectively for DPI in agriculture. Or we often hear it as being called AgriStack, in particular within the Asia region. On behalf of CDPI, allow me to also thank participants today. We are joined by 90 plus participants now. I think it's growing. Thank you so much for being with us today. The webinar will have 3 sections. We will start with a brief introduction from CDPI about digital public infrastructure, followed by a keynote on how we could leverage DPI for agriculture. And then we will have a quick Ask Me Anything, or AMA session with our keynote speaker. We will then move to the panel discussion, delving deeper on various AgriStack in actions. Then we will go to Q&A session. I would encourage participants to drop your questions. Please be specific and address to who your question is at the chat feature anytime. A short housekeeping announcement. This is an open discussion. To ensure we have a smooth webinar today, we will receive questions only from the chat. To keep a constructive webinar, we would greatly appreciate your kind collaboration to keep all our comments and discussion in the chat respectful to the speakers and fellow participants. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our first 2 speakers. We have Tanushka Vaid, Senior Project Officer and Lead for Asia at CDPI. She will provide brief opening remarks and introduction about CDPI. And then we will have our keynote speaker, Dr. Pramod Varma. He is the Chief Architect of India Stack and is also the co-chair of CDPI. Tanushka, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mindy, and thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. I think I'll just set a few opening remarks on who we are at CDPI and what we mean when we refer to digital public infrastructure more broadly, and then I'll hand over to Dr. Pramod Varma to go into the specific details of this. So like Findi briefly mentioned, CDPI is an academic nonprofit advisory team housed at the International Institute for Information Technology. We have DPI practitioners from all around the world. We're around 16 people spread across 5 continents, and we support 40 countries in thinking about how do you build population scale infrastructure that is scalable, that is sustainable, and that can help you achieve equitable socioeconomic process. All our advisory is completely pro bono and technology neutral. We don't advocate for one product or software over the other. Our goal is to see how do we build inclusive digitalization efforts that are in line with global DPI safeguards, that are able to cater to last mile populations, and that are able to advance the growth of economies. The reason why we care about DPI specifically is because of its power to drive exponential change in society, to really leapfrog progress by decades at a time. And to think about this is to think about the way we built roads and railways towards the end of the 19th and 20th century, which allowed trade and commerce to boom across sectors. And when the government built a highway, it didn't say that only government vehicles could operate on it, right? You could have a private car, you could have a government bus, and in developing countries, you could have a bullock cart or people walking on the roads. And the free movement of people across different regions and provinces allowed for physical commerce and trade and economies to boom. And similarly, when we think about digital public infrastructure, we have to think about the digital highways that a government can lay down in society that will allow multiple private and public initiatives to thrive, to be reusable, to reach last mile societies, and create that exponential growth in the digital economy age. And digital public infrastructure, while the term of DPI might be new, DPI is actually the original intention that powered all infrastructure that has now reached scale. When we think about the internet, we don't have a separate internet for India versus Pakistan versus USA versus China. We have a shared internet that is interoperable, that anyone can build on top of. You can build a website, you can build a mobile application, you can build anything. We think about GPS, we think about minimalism, which is to say all GPS actually does is provide your latitude and longitude coordinates. It's so minimal in its purpose, but because of it, it allows someone to deliver food to your doorstep. It allows someone else to deliver commerce to your doorstep. It allows mobility and ride-hailing applications to thrive in society. So minimalism is actually the key word to building reusability and ensuring that your infrastructure scales to population levels. And obviously, when we look at the initial, even private solutions that were built, like email that was hosted by Gmail versus Hotmail, or mobile or telcos that operated with one mobile carrier over another, they were all interoperable, which meant I could send an email from my Gmail account to your Hotmail account without us needing to be at the same email provider, similarly for cell phones. And these are the same foundational principles of reusability, of minimalism, of interoperability, of decentralization that we're now advocating for from a DPI perspective and under the broad umbrella of digital public infrastructure. As you would have been working towards your agriculture journeys and digitization journeys or digital public infrastructure journeys, you would have commonly come across these building blocks, which is to say, maybe we need to have a farmer identity. We need to have some way to transfer social benefit payments. There needs to be some mechanism for data sharing. And now we just wanted to spend a few minutes perhaps talking about what actually makes these building blocks powerful, what can actually drive scale and cross-societal innovation. And so when we think about identities and registries, I think the most important thing to think about is reusability, which is to say, if I'm giving a farmer an ID, how can the farmer reuse that ID in order to gain access to services? Maybe they need to be able to authenticate their ID in order to receive a subsidy or a welfare payment. Maybe they need to be able to share foundational KYC profiles in order to gain access to an agricultural loan. Maybe a farmer registry can also be reused for land registration purposes. Maybe it can be reused to make a social benefit registry. And so to say, these IDs and registries, when we talk about a digital public infrastructure approach, how can they be reusable? And often for identities, it's the capability of having authentication, which is a yes-no response to, is this farmer actually a farmer? Is he a smallholder farmer? Is he below a certain income level, etc.? So an authentication capability as well as an eKYC capability, which is the ability for a farmer to share certain profile information with their consent in order to gain access to services, and registries, which convert databases, which is like locked in data with, say, the agricultural ministry, into reusable data that the land registration office can use, that the social welfare administration can use, that the climate resilience registration office can use, and so on. The next block is payments. And this is one of the most crucial backbones of agriculture, of how do we efficiently deliver welfare payments and subsidies to farmers, many of whom might not be technologically savvy. They might not know how to operate digital wallets, and different welfare programs might be anchored by different departments. You might have a fertilizer subsidy anchored by one department. You might have a climate resilience benefit payment by another department. You might be able to have some general UBI payments that are anchored by a third department. And so over here, what we always talk about is known as a G2P mapper, or a government to person payment rail, which allows the government to transfer funds to any account that is associated with a particular unique ID. So that allows the farmer to have a choice. They can choose to bank with a rural bank account. They can choose to bank with a national bank account. They might choose to have a mobile wallet. Any of those means of accounts, they are free to have. Whereas for the government, they don't go through the burden of constantly updating new accounts or forcing compliance with a particular bank account provider in order to receive funds. And so it is reusable, but not just by the government department issuing it, but by multiple subsidy departments, as well as allows choice for the farmer to see how and where they would like to receive their finances. The third one is data sharing and credentials. And while, of course, very often when we think about data sharing, we immediately think about system to system data sharing and open APIs and a way to connect all these different departments with each other. The truth is, majority of data sharing that happens on the ground happens through paper-based documents. It might be a farmer who's taking a ID card or some kind of card and saying, I'm entitled to subsidies to their local fertilizer shop. It might be someone who is taking like an exemption certificate to get admission into schools to say, I'm entitled to send my child to this government school. And when we have so much paper that's flowing in the economy, very often, while that paper is very good for inclusiveness because farmers are comfortable with it, other people in the sector are comfortable using these physical tools where digital tools might be uncertain or exclusive towards them. Those tools also tend to be very prone to forgery and to fraud, because how do I verify that this paper-based document is actually true? It hasn't been faked. It isn't a duplicate. There isn't someone double dipping into benefits. And putting that burden of authentication on a farmer often excludes lower income society people from being able to access it because it's not worth the verification cost to serve them. And so credentials include a digitally signed QR code, which uses cryptographic processes to sign a document that a farmer can use and share as a paper in order to gain access to tamper-proof, verifiable credentials and certificates and authentication capabilities. This allows your data sharing layers to scale to remote areas. It allows for choice because it can be paper-based, it can be e-wallet based, it can be API-based. And this is backed by trust infrastructure, which is to say, if I am collecting data from a farmer, can I make sure that there is a consent process in place which a farmer understands what they are submitting to, they understand how long their data will be collected, they understand how it will benefit them, what is the process of withdrawing consent, and so on. The last pillar is called open networks or discovery and fulfillment. What that allows you to do is it allows multiple individual farmers to be able to connect, for example, to an open market to sell their goods and produce directly to buyers. It allows for any service or any product in the country to be able to reach multiple people at scale. And we're very lucky to have Sriram, who can also talk a little bit about how he reused open networks to be able to build for farmers in Kenya. I think to end, I would just like to say these three principles of reusability, minimalism, interoperability that can actually drive scale for any of the initiatives you choose to build in your country. So to keep these principles in mind, to make sure that your systems are actually building as infrastructure so they can support multiple use cases and processes on top of it. And that also makes getting started much easier than you would assume. Right? Because it doesn't need to be that you start with a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project that's going to connect every system and provide an end-to-end solution to a problem. But you can start with what we call as the +1 thinking approach, which is to say, what is the one additional thing you can do that will significantly impact populations who are the beneficiaries of those services? With that, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Pramod Varma to maybe talk through the specifics and how these 5 DPI categories we mentioned translate into agriculture-specific experiences. Thank you.
Yeah, I presume I go. I don't control. Okay, somebody is controlling the slides.
I'll control it.
Oh, Tanushka, thank you. So Tanushka, thank you for setting up. The good part, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Wonderful to see Jeremy, Sriram, wonderful to see you guys online. Thank you for your continued support and commitment to the DPG and DPI world. in your own way. And it's a long process. You guys are at it. It's a long journey, but I think everything we have seen in the last decade across multiple countries, India being one of them, convinces us very clearly that there is a way of thinking that can create exponentiality or fast track that transition or digital transformation that you're all attempting to make. Now, obviously, digital is only an enabler. Remember, DPI, DPG, all these conversations are technology is an enabler. It's not the end of it all. It's a way to accelerate what you want to do, what you want to achieve in your country. You can, of course, use open source, DPG is there. But if you say, it's very clear, right? It must be pretty obvious to most of you who are listening. If you don't create reusability, very high chance you are repeatedly investing and creating the whole thing, whatever you're trying to do from scratch. And that's terrible. It's unviable. It doesn't sustain. It keeps everybody in silos. There is no reusability out of it. There is no, sort of compounding value that you are able to generate out of your investment. So it's pretty obvious. DPI, if you don't understand anything about DPI, is one thing, is a takeaway is reuse. Just find ways to get your efforts to be able to reuse for others, to build upon. And if everybody does a little bit of, allows others to build on their reuse, the compounding effect would be exponential. And I think that's a real key. Tanushka covered everything pretty well. That's a good thing, okay? That means my job is easier. And I want really to get Jeremi and Sriram, who are all practitioners in this work, to speak. And there might be others who are experts who are listening to it, who might want to subsequently pitch in as well. If you can move the slides, I'll go through very quickly. I think Tanushka covered this well. If you want to look at a +1 approach to whatever you're doing, if you are actually using, we come across many countries, by the way, as part of CDPI effort, where some form of identity exists. Some countries, very well accepted, very well covered, from a population perspective. But it may not be digital. It may be paper-based. And hence, ability to reuse in a high-trust, low-cost fashion, becomes a problem. Because paper is fakeable, paper needs all kinds of verification, whether you don't know whether your genuine paper is being shown. And also, when paper is collected, obviously the collecting party needs to manually deal with paperwork and paper verifications and paper scanning and whatever you're trying to do. So, neither it works. Paper creates low trust, high cost environment. And this is not what we want in 2025, because digital can significantly advance that. So how do you do? One is to convert your existing identity, to a verifiable credential. And you can actually pretty much nicely do that through putting a verifiable QR code on top of that, giving back a copy of the verifiable ID back to the individual through mobile phone or in a printed fashion, and then building a lightweight authentication layer on top of that verifiable credential. Now, verifiable credential authentication requires slightly more advanced topic because it requires an authentication factor to be incorporated. Now, it could be face as an authentication factor. It could be a mobile number and one-time PIN that is on a mobile, that is authentication factor. It could be things like password, although these days, when it comes to password, people find it difficult because passwords get shared and leaked very fast. But nevertheless, they're all some sort of an authentication factor. So you should look at adding that. And I know Jeremy will talk about some of these practical examples later today. Okay, next one. And the same thing with Tanushka talked about registries. We see this all the time. Different departments, different systems collect data and keep it in the database. That's how digitization works. You digitize records, whether it's land records, crop record, farmer record, family records, or in the case of healthcare and other sectors, similar data. Where do they stay? They stay in the database of the custodian of that system. Is that a problem? Why is it a problem? The problem is not internal at all, because that data is usable internally. That's why you built the database, obviously. But there is no reuse. Zero reuse out of that data. Now, what is the problem? The next department wanting to do something with the farmer does this all over again, because they have no reusable data from the previous effort. So they have to collect the farmer, the family, collect numbers, identity, blah, 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 verify land, verify crop, verify this, verify that. Let's say they want to give fertilizer subsidy or something like that. And then third department comes and say, oh, I want to be able to give farmers access to marketplace, or farmers knowledge and capacity support, basically advisory support, let's say. But how do? They create their own database all over again. So the issue with database is not internal. Issue with database is lack of reuse. And that's where the DPI, if you allow the database records to be credentialed, what is credentialed? Give a copy of the record in a tamper-proof manner back to the farmer. Now, if first department gives that data back to the farmer in an attested form, that means government collected it, verified it, kept it in the database, but a copy of that data is also given in a tamper-proof fashion to the farmer. Advantage is that if a farmer touches the next department can auto onboard using the same data instantly, instead of collecting and verifying and paperwork and manual processes all over again. The cost of onboarding the farmer truly to give that service become very low. So low cost, high trust. And the third and the fourth, the compounding effect is very, very fast now. Because if everybody makes a reusable copy of that data, there are two ways to do that. One, give the copy back to the farmer in a printed fashion, QR codes, e-wallets, however the fashion may be. Alternatively is to offer APIs, application programming interface from this data. Either way, whether you offer it through APIs require you to run an API system, obviously. The other one is slightly less cost to do it, to credential the data. Either way, you're making the data reusable, personal data. That's enormously powerful. Think about it. And this is very straightforward, because you already did the hard work of collecting the data. You already did the hard work of verifying the data. You already using that data for your own internal purpose. So it's actually a good data. 1+1 step of credentialing that data would go a long way for the next, and for the farmer also. It makes it very convenient for them to now join the next scheme or the next service they want to access. Okay. And here, obviously, example that AgriStack in India is making significant progress in credentialing and giving back to the farmer. That's a very powerful notion, empowering the farmer with his or her own data. Land is with him or her, crop is by her or him. So if you can credential, that is very powerful. And once you do this, Imagine a social security system, social protection or benefits transfer system wants to create a particular scheme for a farmer, let's say in Kenya, Ethiopia, or Indonesia. How do you create the scheme? To create the scheme, you can come up with the scheme, but to onboard the farmer today, they actually have to onboard in a manual recapture of data fashion. So if a registry is formed from the previous slide, then this kind of processes, onboarding users onto a direct benefits transfer or social protection system becomes very, very fast. And once you onboard it, obviously you need a system to track the delivery of the benefits, track seamless automated delivery of the benefits. But not only the benefits can be delivered, even this system can now credential that data and say, this farmer is a recipient of the scheme in a certificate. That means social protection scheme certificate can be given. Now imagine the power of it. Now the farmer can go to the third one and say, oh, I'm a recipient of the scheme. Can I also get the other scheme? Right? So it creates amazing compounding effect. Now, obviously, OpenSSP, Jeremi is here, he builds an open source version of where the countries can use this, and he'll talk about that later. Okay, yeah, next one. And this is the same story of data sharing. Traditionally, data sharing is looked at it as a problem of two departments. I want to challenge that notion, and the entire open source community, or a large community, open community, and CDPI recently published a paper, and I suggest you go and read that paper. It's on CDPI's website, vc.cdpi.dev, where the idea is this: why should every department tries to create a data sharing framework with other department, especially when it comes to personal data and credential? And how does it work across jurisdictional boundaries? Why should one state in India share with other state? It gets harder because there's no incentive. You need bilateral discussions. There are political disconnects. There is, all kinds of now cross-border, completely missing, failed attempt. Almost will not work. I think there is a new way you can actually address this by making the farmer the owner of the data, or the keeper of the data, or conduit of that data. And that's a very powerful notion, because now nobody has to actually discuss anything. Each department or each scheme or each farmer system you're building, if you're building one system, credential that data, give a copy of that data to the farmer, and if everybody does that, farmer becomes the keeper, custodian of their own data, their own crop records, their own land records, a copy of the data, of course, and make the data non-tamperable. And today, technology allows you to cheaply, quite cheap actually, to do this, to make any data non-tamperable through cryptographic proofing. You can actually create digital signatures and proofs so that they are non-tamperable. Advantage of non-tamperability is that when the farmer presents that data to the next party, maybe they want to get a farmer loan from a bank, the bank now don't have to redo the entire verification of all the claims the farmer is making. I am a landowner. How do I know? My crop was this. How do I know? I have so much of land holding. How do I know? I am a recipient of this government benefits. How do I know? None of these claims are verifiable traditionally. But if you credential that data and give it back to the farmer in a non-tamperable, it becomes exponentially powerful when the farmer goes to the next service, to access the next service, whether it's advisory service, whether it's access to capital, or whether it's access to market. Doesn't matter what they're accessing, input or output market, you can actually do. Next one. And that's exactly the same thing. We can actually look at, without centralizing and heavy coordination and bilateral contracts between every department and every jurisdiction and every country, you can make the data sharing possible using technological enablement like cryptographic proofing. Allows the farmer to become the center of his or her universe, rather than the system or the government becoming at the center of the universe. The individual become the center of that universe. And when it comes to open, now I'm talking about personal data. When it comes to open data sets, it's a different treatment, because that is non-personal data, like weather data, large scale aggregate data, water levels data, soil data, and so on, right? They're all open data sets. Or open doesn't mean free, but non-personal data sets. They're aggregate data sets typically. You will need an architecture that actually allows. In fact, very interestingly, I walked out of a conversation by Open AgriNet community to create world's first open agri data sharing architecture literally 10 minutes ago. So I look forward to working with many of you to say there may be a way to actually incentive align data sharing of non-personal data. Personal data has to be through the individual. Non-personal data is aggregate data, right? Without giving the autonomy or control of that data. So if you are a weather data provider, you keep control, you keep the autonomy, you make the right policies, licensing and pricing policy, but make it available into the larger network. That's the idea of open data sets. We'll come back subsequently, talk about some of this. And the last one, this Sriram's cup of tea, and he'll talk about this much more, is that while each department views ourselves as silos, I might be a department who is carrying women farmers. I might be caring about agriculture research and knowledge sharing. I might be interested in farmer loans. I might be a bank who is interested in giving capital access. I might be an insurance company who is providing agri-crop insurance products. I might be an input marketplace. I might be an output marketplace who is interested in buying your produce. That means each of these nodes in the life of a farmer today is in silo. Each of them work in their own way, but the farmer is a farmer is a farmer. It's the same person that we are trying to address. So how do we make flip the architecture to put the farmer at the center of accessing a variety of products and services through an open network, not through a platform. And Sriram is actually a practitioner who's building it under Kuza, and I'll let him talk much more. Some of them might, by the way, before I conclude, some of them might sound wacko or advanced to some of you, but these are in practice. These are happening in practice, and we want the community to deeply understand, engage, and see how together we can actually scale some of these archetypes, because there's enough open source efforts and there's enough good stuff happening. But how do we scale these archetypes across agriculture community around the world? So I encourage the community to come together, listen to the practitioners today, and maybe subsequently engage. Thank you so much.
Thank
Vidya,
you so
back
much.
to you.
Thank you so much, Pramod. Thank you so much for anchoring us through the +1 thinking approach. We have one question, if you still have time with us. We would like to use your presence with us. So in the farming system in particular, there is this possibility of continuous change in farmers' data. Phone numbers keep changing, land details, tenant farmers, crop details, and seasonal varying data like livestock. What are the potential challenges and risks, and how this can be addressed? How do you manage this in India's case, for example?
Yeah. We it's a lot of times we make the mistake of assuming data is static. And data is, oh, let's do a massive data collection. Let's spend $5 million collecting agriculture data. Instantly to realize that it goes stale in no time. That means the artificial way to collect data as an independent layer, independent approach doesn't seem to work because it's costly, time consuming. By the time you produce that data, it might take 6 months to produce. The data has moved on. Life has moved on. But what happens in reality is that when the land gets mutated, for example, maybe I'm a father, I have 2 children, I had 10 acres of land or 5 acres of land, and I divided part of the land across 2 people, or maybe I sold some part of the land for some other economic reasons. It's almost always a practice. The land registrar who is there, who's already capturing the data, latest data, because the land mutation and the land sale is already being recorded. The question we have to ask ourselves is that how does the source of truth systems that hold the live source of truth data become available back to the farmer so that I can present the latest data to the, instead of independent data collection efforts that are artificially induced in the system. Okay, so remember, the good thing about it is that every system is being digitized today. Everybody is digitizing. The question we have to ask is this: what is the incentive and the architecture for the land registry, for the bank, for the service provider who is already touching the farmer and keeping track of the data, to be able to offer that data in real time or in a verifiable fashion, so that others don't have to collect the data? If they don't have to repeatedly collect the data, you can almost make sure the source of truth is there, accessible. And source of truth is accessible, very, very high chance you have access to near real-time data or near true truth of the data, and not a ripple effect of that data which is collected. 1 year later, you're publishing that data by the time data has changed. Right? So I think you should look at unearthing source of truth straight into the data regime rather than independent data collection drives. Now, sometimes you have to do data collection for survey and statistical study and impact study. I'm not saying don't collect data, but don't try to collect all the data, trying to have created artificially collected data as a data sharing. Try to get the source of truth to offer that data in real time. That is better architecture than any day, because that will always be live.
Thank you very much, Pramod. Dear participants, we now have to move to our panel discussion. We will now proceed to the panel, which will elaborate AgriStack in action. First in the panel, we will have Ms. Hang Thi Thanh Pham, Senior Resilience Officer and Module Leader for Land, Water, Climate Change and Resilience at the FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Hang will talk about DPI for Agri-Food System Transformation in Asia. Hang, the stage is yours.
Thank you, India. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. First of all, thank you, CDPI, for inviting FAO to be part of this webinar. As India mentions, I'm going to touch upon a little bit on how we can leverage DPI for the agri-food system transformations in the regions. Unfortunately, my colleagues who leads on digital transformation is not available today, so let me try to do the justice to what FAO is doing. First of all, maybe just very quickly, what do we mean by agri-food systems? So agriculture is already a complex system with crops, with livestock, with fisheries, aquaculture, with forestry. And when agriculture is put in the linkage with natural environment, with land, soil, water, as well as with the broader socioeconomic objective and outcomes like food security, nutrition, poverty reductions, well-being, and sustainable livelihood for everybody, that is the agri-food systems that we are dealing with. And in FAO, we are promoting the agri-food system transformation through what we call as a four betters, going together: better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, to transform the agri-food system to be more efficient, to be low carbon, climate and disaster resilience, and more inclusive, that leave no one behind. And digital transformations, or DPI, for FAO, what we are focusing on is promoting the use and adopting of digital technologies, but very important, is also promoting policy agenda and investment to address the digital divide and maximize the digital benefits to ensure that everybody benefits. Particular, as FAO, we're dealing with mostly small and vulnerable farmers. So FAO in the region has been doing a lot towards the kind of like building blocks of the DPI as presented by CDPI colleagues. For digital entity, we start working on farmer registries, but have been doing a lot in terms of integrating climate and disaster vulnerability data into social registries, so that can also be used for targeting, first to make sure that like vulnerable population are included in social protection systems, but also social registry can be used in targeting and reaching the people in need in emergency and resilience interventions. Digital payments, we're dealing with both policies in social protection, policy in disaster risk management, humanitarian work, as well as technologies to promote digital payment. Just a quick example from the Philippines. Was 6,000 beneficiaries of our anticipatory action cash that was delayed. Only a few of them could actually immediately return to livelihood because their fishing boats were protected with the advanced cash. For a few others that received the payment after the typhoon, they took a month to recover, to come back to their fishing livelihood. And for those who didn't receive the payment in time, it took them 5 months. So digital payments with like enabling policies with like technologies is critical for our work. And last but not least is securing and sharing data. Vinod mentioned that don't go for centralizations, but in our work, for example, in agroclimate services, we work a lot in terms of policy, enabling policies and institutional coordinations, bringing the hydromet agencies, the agriculture sectors, as well as disaster risk management authorities in creating this kind of like services, information and services, and particular also like localizing those for the needs of the different location, different farming system, different populations. But on top of all of this, I think FAO is doing a lot in terms of like creating the enabling environment and ecosystem for DPI and DPG, for starting with, for example, e-agriculture, or now we call digital agriculture strategy, working with countries, for example, in Sri Lanka with the DPI infrastructure that inform further investment in this area, with a lot of policies and like getting into innovative technologies and bringing the governments together in implementing them. Just quickly on a few examples of the FAO public digital public goods. Many of you might be familiar with our global things like, for example, the hand-in-hand geospatial platform, the FAO digital service portfolio, our water activity open access database WAPO, or our like forestry, the open forest, the platform of data information that allow countries or even individuals to generate data analysis, understanding our progress in forests and determine the cost-effective forest action. So in Asia, as I mentioned, we have been working on a few kind of like solutions. For example, the SIT, the Smart Extension and Decision Support System for farmers in Sri Lanka. In Vietnam, the disaster monitoring system incorporate a lot of like not only hazard and early warning data, but also socioeconomic vulnerability data, the informations on how community-based disaster risk management projects are implemented and leading into the informed decisions on further investment. In Laos, PDR, and Timor-Leste, we have come up with what we call as vulnerability and risk dashboards that contain not only the statistics like risks and vulnerability information to classify or rank the lowest administrative unit, the villages, which one is at what risk to the agri-food system. And the system can also incorporate the seasonal and more real-time data in terms of the cropping, in terms of like livestock and others, and then helping the government determine which areas are at risk. For example, with the anticipatory drought or flood coming, and what kind of action that needs to protect the agriculture livelihood. So I mentioned the integration of climate disaster vulnerability into social registry and digital and anticipatory cache. We are also like working on machine learning to refine and build the accuracy of anticipatory action triggers in even data scarce environment like Timor-Leste and Laos PDR. So a few learnings with all our efforts. First of all, the enabling policy and bringing the institution, the sectors together is really critical to understand the multiple benefits of that kind of solution and systems, and also to promote the data sharing and working together. In Asia Pacific, like the kind of like issues like language, the needs of the special groups, for example, indigenous people, is very important in thinking about all of these solutions. Particularly our region, it's home to 70% of the whole world indigenous people, more than 350 millions. The literacy level, digital literacy, particularly among women, that is a key consideration when we develop, for example, digital and agriculture extension services in Pakistan. The access and poor infrastructure, particularly in marginalized areas. And last but not least, and very important, is really to promote the demand for data-informed decision-making from the macro level, policy level, to the farmers level, to kind of like generate the interest in new technologies, new farming practices, and therefore the need for data and the technologies to support them adopt this kind of innovative practices. Sharing, promoting peer learning, and promoting collaboration for joint progressing is also an important element of work in FAO. Some of you might have attended our regional digital agriculture solution forum in 2016, in 2018 in China, in 2020 as a virtual forum, in 2023 here in Bangkok, Thailand. And let me also use the opportunity to invite you to join us in the upcoming 2025 forum, which is become inter-regional digital agriculture solution forum that would be on the 3rd to 5th September here in Bangkok. That will not only bring the solution and learning from the region, but also other regions around the world. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hang. Well, FAO clearly has played a very important role in shaping a better agri-food systems. Thank you for walking us through the 6 main learnings from FAO. Let's move on to the second speaker. We have Jeremi Joslin, the Executive Director of OpenSPP, who will talk about enabling agricultural transformation practical DPI journeys, lessons from OpenSPP in Laos, PDR, and Sri Lanka. Over to you, Jeremi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the previous speaker. I think it's I'm kind of going to show a little bit more like how does it goes into practice and continuing, because like we're following some of the similar concept. We're building directly on those concepts. And so I'm going to talk about OpenSPP, which is an open source platform for digital public. So, oops. So first, who we are. So OpenSPP is a platform hosted by a nonprofit organization called the ACN, Association for Digital Cooperation. We're fully committed to building open source software platform for this domain. Sorry. Our team has over like 10 years of experience in building registries and benefit distributions in many different contexts, being with government or the humanitarian sector. So we decided to develop OpenSPP because we saw a recurring need. Many countries and organizations need robust tools for this kind of systems, but often lack the resources to implement it from scratch. So we built OpenSPP as a highly modular platform. Think of it as like a toolbox offering over 60 different components, everything from beneficiary management, registries, geolocation, cash transfer mechanism, income distribution, and specific module for farming activities. And we'll see more later. It's designed to be flexible for building various types of registries, whether social protection, management information system, agriculture registry, or disability registries. So how does OpenSPP fit into this bigger picture? So in this diagram, we see different components, layers through the agricultural context. At the base, of course, you have the physical network infrastructure, and critically, the policy, regulatory framework, and governance within which all these systems are operating. OpenSPP provides the essential tools on top of it, which are here like as a core component. You can see things like the farmer registry, farmer group registry, farming activity, farming land registry, and entitlement distribution. So these first registries are showing like what Pramod was mentioning earlier, like the critical identity and data sharing and registry layers specific to agriculture, but providing it for them. And then we have the entitlement distribution, which is more integration with the payment infrastructure that was also mentioned earlier, and also can be with the network, as Pramod was also showing earlier, like all the network for the distribution, basically like integration with the full supply chain food systems, basically. We also can provide, like this layer also can provide, allowing program to accurately determine and manage the eligibility for different programs, different benefits, whether it's cash or in kind. So as mentioned earlier, one of the key principles for DPI is the reusability, right? So once these core components are established using OpenSPP or other systems, right? Like, I mean, OpenSPP can be one box, it can be, or another system can be another box. It doesn't have to be all the same software. These components become the foundational building blocks, and they can then power a diverse range of use cases, like farmer loan, managing farmer support program, implementing nutrition initiative, targeting for climate adaptation project, improving disaster risk mitigation, as mentioned before, without the need to build entirely separate siloed systems, right? So you would build on top of this system, probably collecting additional information specific to yours, but like you use this underlying system to do your initial targeting, and then you collect additional information specific to your program into your system, and then use it, right? But you're reducing a lot the work, you're reducing a lot the cost for each program. And so how does OpenSPP provide this? It's we try to empower a farmer-centric approach, right? Through different key features. So first and really key, as also was mentioned by the previous speakers, is dynamic registries, right? Like we cannot continue to do registering data and having stay still for like 5 years before we update it, right? We know that condition of farmers, of the household, of the climate are changing all the time. And to be really efficient, we need to have a system that is able to adapt as things change, right? So we need to make it easy to update, to validate the updates, through the different seasons. And as I saw in some of the comments, like yes, like some farmers might grow on one field for one season, then on another field for another season. Things are evolving all the time in agriculture. So we try to make it easy around this. Then the second that is really key, and that was like highlighted by Pramod, is the data portability, right? How do we make it easy for farmers to own their data, to be able to share it, even though maybe some departments, some organization are not sharing it, like they don't have a data sharing agreement and everything. That puts the farmer in the center, making it easier to share this data. So that's why we're supporting verifiable credentials for farmer identity, but also for many different things. As Pramod was saying, like can be for proof of participation in a program. It could be about what they are harvested like the last few seasons, anything that can help them get access to services through banks or loan or anything like that. So this aligns a lot with the DPI data sharing and credential layer that were presented earlier. The third is interoperability, right? And this is one place also we're working a lot at OpenSPP. We're part of different committees for interoperability. It's important to prioritize these open standards and open APIs, right? While journey toward interoperability across all systems has a long way to go. I mean, in agriculture, there's still a lot to do in social protection also. Health has done a lot more progress, and I think like we should aim to go toward this type of interoperability. And building on this principle from the start is crucial, right? Because you want to avoid vendor lock-in. You want to be able to have this connection between the different parts of your ecosystem as you're building it. And so you can really truly realize the reusability potentials that a DPI component have. And also we provide like quite important features around granular access control to try to improve around data privacy and building trust for farmers. So now let's look quickly to two examples where we are working. So in Sri Lanka, for example, they had long-standing fertilizer subsidy scheme, which despite some digitalization efforts still face some significant inefficiencies and subsidy leakage, right? And by applying the principle shared earlier, the +1 principle, we didn't totally reinvent the wheel, right? Like, so instead we used to enhance the existing processes. We implement new digital components, especially the beneficiary farm registry to capture the agricultural activity linked to this program and the land size data accurately. And we also build the fertilizer supplier registry, right? That records the amount and the distribution of fertilizer by the farmers. With the idea that when we started, some of the other registries were not ready. But the idea is that as we're going to go, some of this data that was collected specifically for this are kind of designed to be integrated with other registries that we can integrate and pull the data. So we don't have to collect specifically for this program, but more like reuse what is being built in other departments as well. So it's a concrete example of using different DPI components, at least different principles. Then if we look at Laos, which is fairly different, very different challenges, because agricultural data there is very fragmented, scattered across, I think, around like 50 projects, mostly in isolated spreadsheets. So this led to massive duplication of effort, lack of overall visibility, and difficulty in keeping data updated. So again, here, applying the same approach, we started small, focusing on building reusable components. So we focused on the core registry, so with the farmer registry, and we integrated data from 4 different projects that we are starting with, right? We focused on those. And through deeper engagement, we also learn a lot on the way, right? And this is why also like starting with a pilot is quite interesting, because there is like the theory on how things people think are being done and the reality of how things is in the field. We learned, for example, that a lot of things are happening at the agricultural production group level. So we prioritize strengthening this part in Laos, for example, at the registry layer, while still building the farmer data registry and capturing activity and land size. And by doing this incrementally, we've been able like to kind of identify what is common across different projects, and we're going to add more and more projects as things goes to this farm, to these registries, building the infrastructure as we go. So with all this different work, so what can we draw from this experience, and what are some of the learning we got from this? So first, I think it's really key to identify a specific and high priority challenge. You don't want to try to do everything at once. You start from something that is important, that has the push, the drive of the government or the agency to solve it, and stay focused. Then second is looking at what are the different building blocks you could reuse if things are already existing, or that you could build that can then be reused across different projects. So you need to start working on the modularity of your implementation here. And it's true that registries are an easy way to build reusable components. Then you can look at different digital public goods, and there is a registry from the Digital Public Good Alliance where you can look at different open source software to solve some problems. In FAO has some also. I would start by this thing and to identify the open source model, the platform to help you implement what you need. Then build incrementally, right? Start with maybe a proof of concept or a pilot and then scale, right? In all the project we did, there was always like a lot of learning between what was a theory and what is a practice, right? So if you start with a pilot, I think it's quite important. You're going to learn and you're going to be able to put back into the learning into the project before you go to scale. And allowing you to adjust before you really invest much more into this. Think about interoperability early also, right? Even if you don't need the full interoperability immediately, design the system using open standard and API. Ideally, choose some systems that are interoperability ready, because we know not all the systems are there. For example, like if we take Sri Lanka, national ID is not there yet, but like OpenSPP is ready to be integrated with MOSIP, with a national ID digital identity system, right? So these are also things to look into, is making sure things are ready to be integrated, even though you don't need it yet. If you're building from scratch, look into the standards that exist, right? And try as much as possible to leverage existing standards to implement your API. So it will facilitate integration with other systems later on. And finally, engage with the stakeholders and plan for the users early, right? Technology is an enabler. True success really depends on aligning all the stakeholders, understanding the user need and change management for effective implementation from the ground. So, and I think this echoes a lot of things that were presented by the previous speakers. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us also later. And I think, Sri, I think it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for sharing your important work. Okay, let's go to our third and final speaker, Sriram Bharatam, founder, chief mentor of Kuza One, who will share his inspirational experience transforming smallholders farmers from subsistence to commercial farming in Kenya. Siri, floor is yours. Thank you so much, Sri.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you please confirm you're able to hear my voice okay?
I can. We can.
And you can see the screen too?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, CDPI, for giving me this opportunity. I think the previous speakers have more or less set the context, set the tone, and shared with us the experiences. I would want to take a practitioner approach as to how we as a private sector social enterprise have gone about doing this in our own little way. So Kuza is a certified benefit corporation, a private sector social enterprise, working at the grassroots with a very simple idea that we started looking at the key core challenges of smallholder farmers. Dr. Pramod Varma did speak about having user at the center. We are all here in this business because of this mama farmer. Just to set the context in East Africa, to be specific about Kenya, an average Kenyan farmer is a little over 60 plus years. If we start with KYC, know your customer, nobody seems to be knowing her. What she's doing, where she's growing, what she's buying, where she's selling, how much is she losing for post-harvest losses. Majority of them are still collateral-based credit. And lastly, about 30 to 40% of what she produces, she's already losing because of lack of post-harvest infrastructure. Now, that's a vicious cycle she's in, and she's not able to come out of that. Now, on the contrary, if you look at the sector at large, at the ecosystem, I spoke about the farmers. Now, if you look at input providers, if you look at finance providers, if you look at the market off-takers, logistic providers, consumers, and most importantly, I also saw a question on data-driven decision-making by the government. All of them have their share of challenges. Now, we can keep talking about this till the cows come home, but I wanted to share with you how we started reimagining it. So we asked one fundamental question. What is available in abundance in the rural areas? We found a lot of unemployed youth and millions of small-scale farmers or small-holding farmers, and most importantly, lots of community spaces. Now, while an average Kenyan farmer is a little over 60 years, an average Kenyan is 19 years. There's a massive intergeneration crisis that's already hitting us. Now, what we then said is, what if we have these unemployed youth as the agents of change? And can they be the first domino who can, if we are able to influence, if we are able to shape them, and if we are able to get them ready, can we change the narrative? That's the thesis with which we started off our journey a decade ago. Now, how do we get this unemployed youth ready? And that's where we came out with something called READY, Rural Entrepreneur Development Incubators. We have designed a very thorough process of selecting, identifying these local community, village level entrepreneurs or youth who have enterprising nature, put them through a structured incubation and have them ready as agriculture entrepreneurs or agripreneurs. They learn with peer-to-peer, they learn with the Kuza mentors, they learn by doing, connect with a set of farmers, connect with a set of service providers, and then they grow. Initially, we thought it's a linear approach. We do this and our job ends. No, we realize that our job starts after these youth agripreneurs get ready. And as they're doing this, we also realize that, yes, they are not agronomists. They do not have understanding of the science. Then came the second challenge, which we said, what if we are able to democratize access? What I meant by democratizing access is the science-based knowledge, which I know is sitting with a lot of research institutions, academia, and set of private sector companies. And the second is, how do we reach to these remote areas where there's no internet, we still have power challenges, and create experiential learning for these farmers? And that's where we came out with this portable digital portable backpacks. This is like literally a backpack, a livelihood in a backpack. Looking at the extreme conditions of Africa and also Asia, where we have been working for the last decade plus, we came out with this backpack, which has a set of digital devices designed to work without internet, without power, but creates an enabling environment or creates an experiential learning. Let me just share a snapshot of this. In this case, you can actually see this young agripreneur speaking about the complex topic of soil health, and he's a high school dropout. What gives him the agency is the science has already been democratized. It's already been curated, working with the research and academia. And that's now made available in local languages. We created a massive library of over 10,000 plus videos. Sorry, not created, we curated. And then making it available in local languages and now even local dialects. Because for us to see and have a systems change, we had to get this piece of the puzzle sorted. So two challenges. One, creating the trust or building the relational trust at the last mile. With each of these agripreneur working with approximately 10 groups of farmers, each group of about say 15, 20 farmers, that's what becomes their span of control. So they become their go-to people. They earn the trust by doing this education and doing the extension services. And then they also double up as service providers. Now I'll speak about that in a minute. So who are we working with? We are working with over 30 plus governments, mostly local governments, working with large private sector corporations, regional partners, over 75 plus service providers, and development agencies. Now, by taking an approach like this, we have seen this in two parts. One, getting the youth ready. As I said, the first intervention is getting the local youth as entrepreneurs, equipping them the tools, putting them through structured incubation, and then we set up something called a One Network. Now, that's why we said, let's build the trust before tech. Now that we have the trust, the technology comes into play. A One Network is a curated digital marketplace with all the service providers coming in with a very simple ask that they have something to offer and they need something in return. We mapped it to across all the ecosystem stakeholders, and it's been a painstaking process to bring them on board, have their incentives aligned, because none of the ecosystem actors have the same incentives. Their incentives are different, but it was extremely important for someone like us to put up our hand and then see how do we make this happen. So the theory of change is one, we are building trust individually by creating local agripreneurs one at a time. Second, we are building collective capacities of them. So when 4, 5, 6, 10 of them come together with complementarity, that's already 10 times 200 farmers, about 2,000 plus farmers are serviced by 10 different agripreneurs, and that starts creating the magic. And that's when the location-based activities will now start becoming, spreading out onto the network. Let me quickly share with you the network effect of this. You can actually see the explosive nature of this network effect with each dot there showing each of the constituents. For example, the orange ones are agripreneurs. The green ones are the counties like in India, like the states, the administrative blocks, and the purple ones are the service providers. And the size of the block shows the volume of transactions they are doing. Now, you can see all of them start at the edge when they are nobody. They don't have an identity of their own. But once they go through the incubation and once they start working together is when you see this network effect happening. So as of end of last year, over $22 million worth of transactions, these young people have recorded in about 1/3 of Kenya. Now that's just a beginning. So World Bank has done an independent evaluation on this program, and it stood out very clearly that with 65% of the farmers being women, and 70% plus said the farmers do not have, they're accessing a new product or a service for the first time through the Kuza agripreneurs, and 60% said they can't find a good alternative. The unintended consequence of these women farmers is that they started reducing their household debt. About 80% of them reported that. 90% said increased household savings and overall quality of life. And we have seen in about 3 to 4 seasons, approximately about 2 years, their incomes are almost increasing by 50%. Now, this is the same thing that we have tried, experimented, and failed many a times, but arrived at a place where with over 1.5 million farmers that we are seeing, who are getting benefited with 5,000 plus agripreneurs, we then said, let's go deep. And this is where our journey with CDPI started off late 23. And then we said, what got us here is not going to get us there. For us to be able to validate this model, we wanted to hit a population scale. And this is the map of Kenya. And all the green portion is where we are operating already. That's about 43 of the 47 counties. And our journey started here. 2020 with 15 agripreneurs. During the COVID time is when we have scaled it 10x. And then we now are 3,000 agripreneurs as of last year. That's about 2024. And then the president of the country have seen this, and then here is where he's gone ahead and made a big announcement to bring 20,000 youth agripreneurs inspired by this Kuza agripreneur model to say that can we have 5 to 7 agripreneurs per village across the country? And in a way, what are we trying to do is to institutionalize last mile. And for this, we then had to get registries in place. So The foundational data sets are ready with about 6.5 million farmers being profiled. And again, who did this? The youth agripreneurs of the last mile. 18,000 plus agro dealers have been profiled. Now at 10% of the soil registry of the country is now being done. And with the satellite weather data is all available, now the foundation is set. And then with 7 to 8 agripreneurs per every village across the country, also we managed to get the extension policy revised to make it pluralistic. That's not only government, even again, I mean the civil society and even private sector youth agripreneurs can do it. So this entire journey started off with the World Bank hosting something called a 1 million farmer platform in Kenya in 2019. And as part of the Disruptive Agriculture Technology Initiative was done, and over 25 AgTechs like Kuza have been identified, and we were all asked to go work with set of counties. Interestingly, 98% of the counties have adopted this agripreneur model because they saw that one, we are building local capacities. Second, there's sustainability built into it because they earn and they learn and earn. And most importantly, it's a people plus a platform approach. And we could crowd in all other AgTechs and traditional players into it. So where are we right now? Institutionalization of the last mile is being done with the public good investment. Institutionalization of service delivery is an area where we are currently working. And most importantly, the next challenge that we currently have is on market orchestration. Now that we have the demand of 6.5 million plus farmers, now the market actors are coming to the table because we are actually solving all of their challenges. And this is where we have pivoted all of this model on Beacon protocol. Dr. Pramod Varma spoke about this. By bringing in open governance powered by the Beacon protocol, we are now driving accountability amongst network participants, with agripreneurs acting as nodes of trust and access at the last mile, solving both extension and also the service delivery problem. To summarize, here are the 4 foundational pillars that we saw are essential. One is we needed a network host. Kenya Agriculture Livestock Research Institution, a public institution, is now holding that, responsible for governance and also the network operations. Kuza is playing the role of a network orchestrator by crowding in all the actors. The network participants are both consumer and provider side platforms and also actors, the traditional ones. And the knowledge partners are universities, agri-research institutions, and others. So this in a nutshell is our journey. Happy to take a few questions. And yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Siri, for sharing your extraordinary work. Okay, dear participants, let's move on straight to the Q&A segment. We have received a number of questions, but unfortunately, we also have very limited time left. But I think we will have one question for all speakers, and I have regrouped your questions from the participants. Thank you for your enthusiasms. Siri, Hang, and Jeremy. So you've clearly done a lot for better agri-food system at policy level, at innovation level, also ground up experience. So what is one big homework that you think you or your organization ought to do to crack, and you need to still make headways in the next 3 to 5 years in this space? And who do you expect to collaborate more in the future?
Can I go first?
Go ahead, Siri.
Thank you. So we have seen that if you look at each of these institutions within the ecosystem, all of them are individually very strong. But collectively as an ecosystem, we are very weak. The biggest challenge that we have is to see how do we create an enabling environment, or rather, how do we have the public sector, private sector, and the philanthropy sector work in unison? There is a very popular proverb in Africa that, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think it's about time we need to demonstrate. And the biggest challenge for us is to see how do we make this collective or bring this collective strength. And I feel this is where the DPI, like a public good infrastructure or digital public infrastructure, can actually be a unifying factor so that everybody can bring their own respective strengths and then see collectively we can go far. Thank you.
Thank you, Siri.
Okay,
Jeremy,
I can go
Jeremy,
next.
go ahead.
I was about to say the same thing, probably not as well as Sri, but I think that's a really good one. But I can say more like on the technical aspect, because we're more like at the implementation level. I think for me, very much related to this is around interoperability. I think this is really important that we all start to work together as different organizations, so different countries, to work on defining better standards for interoperability in this space, because this is what is going to enable better reuse DPI infrastructure in this space. So interoperability for me would be the word. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. Hang,
Yes,
last
I
one
think
from you.
I think Sriri and Jeremy have said on the important point. Maybe just for us to think, one is that like digitalization's DPI has been understood as the enabler for the sustainable agriculture or agri-food system transformation, but how you actually bring it into practice in different country context is really important. And therefore, I mean, again, Sri, I think the importance of bringing the different sectors, everybody together, and really demonstrate the benefits of that, so that the commitment is translated into actual investment and action. And I think the second thing for FAO is also this whole issues of public-private partnerships, to really like make it work in practice, to leverage the capacity of the private sectors and then generate the private sector contribution to the work on agri-food system transformation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hang, Jeremy, and Siri. You make my job very easy today. I don't even have to summarize this 1 hour and plus webinar. So your final response, I think, sums this webinar really well. On behalf of CDPI, we have now come to the end of the webinar. On behalf of CDPI, all of us,
allow me to thank all of you again, distinguished speakers, distinguished participants, for sharing your knowledge, your energy, your interests, and your great questions. Before we end the webinar today, allow us to just say that we realize it is almost impossible to capture all efforts that have been done to equip better our farmers and our agri-food systems here in Asia region, let alone globally. But if you are currently doing something to help build DPI in ag, that will be helpful for others, or your country needs support to help design your DPI journey, both general or in agricultural sector, please do get in touch with us. Before the end of the week, we will send all the materials, recording and presentations from this webinar. You will also see from the screen, respective QR codes that will take us to respective public handles of our organizations, the 4 of us. You can scan them and it will take you to our website and contact details. On behalf of the speakers, CDPI, we would like to say thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in our next CDPI webinar series. Thank you. Thank you, Siri, Hang, and Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you
Bye,
very much
Jeremy.
for
Bye.
having us. Yeah.